Hello, everyone, and welcome to our wrap up, I guess, of our course in Introduction to Korean History. This is our final week of material. It is about Korean soft power. And so we're looking basically at the period 1989 to 2020. If you step back and just take a 40,000 foot view, so to speak, of the history of Korea in the last few decades, it seems like South Korea in the late 20th century and early 21st century seems like this unstoppable juggernaut that comes out of nowhere to just dominate the world. But the reality is far more complicated. And unfortunately, in an overview course, we don't have time to go into all the details of this period, but it is very important if you want to understand more to spend some time reading more about the period of the 1990s and early 2000s, especially in the development of Korea. In 1990, the Republic of Korea, South Korea, normalized relations with the Soviet Union, which was on the verge of collapse at the time. But as a result, Russia no longer vetoed the recognition of the two Koreas in the United Nations. And so the Republic of Korea was officially recognized the same year as a United Nations country, which had wonderful impacts for South Korea later in its history in the last few decades. In 1996, something very important took place. There was the conviction of former presidents Chun Doo-hwan and Roh Tae-woo for murder and corruption charges stemming from the 1979 military coup. This sounds like a horrible thing that took place, but actually it was a milestone in the development of South Korean democracy. The then president, Kim Young-sam, was actually a close collaborator with Roh Tae-woo and had no desire to put him in jail, but he had to bow to popular pressure to do so. And so it sent a very clear message to the former elites, especially to the military forces that had taken over the country in the past, that the era of the military dictator was over. And it was also a very clear message to the entire world that in Korea, no one is above the law, not even a former president, or as took place in 2016, the current president of Korea was actually removed from power and put in prison. Something that perhaps the United States and other countries might want to take note of for future political activity. Just a thought. In 1997, the Republic of Korea, South Korea's upward economic climb hit a major roadblock. There was a debt crisis that began in 1996 that resulted in the collapse of what were called the Asian tiger economies, these apparently unstoppable economies in East Asia, such as Korea, China, and Japan, that seemed to be growing by leaps and bounds. Suddenly, they were in economic crisis. The economies were collapsing. Japan was thrown into a recession that it has yet to recover from decades later fully. To avoid complete bankruptcy, the Republic of Korea had to borrow massive amounts of money from the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and they also had to suffer strict austerity and restructuring consequences that affected all of its business and economic activities. Fortunes were lost overnight. Once rich families fell into poverty. Companies and banks fell like dominoes. For many South Koreans, it looked like the end of the world. But the Korean people were no strangers, as we know by now, to hardship and difficulty, and they pulled together and pulled through once again. And in fact, by the turn of the millennium, the ROK had outpaced Japan as an economic leader of the region. If 1997 is seen as a lost year by many South Koreans, 1998 must be considered the year Korea began to conquer the world, so to speak. By the end of 1997, the Republic of Korea had elected Kim Dae-jung as its president. It was the first peaceful transition of power in Republic of Korea history, especially to an opposition non-military figure. One of President Kim's visionary moves was to establish the Ministry of Culture and Tourism. That ministry began to fund and actively support what it called the Hallyu Industry Support and Development Plan. Hallyu means Korean wave, and it's actually a Chinese word that the Chinese were using to describe by that point how South Korean media, pop, and culture seemed to be dominating even in China. And so the term really stuck. And so this was a concerted government effort to support the progress of South Korean cultural exports in the region originally and later in the entire world. The Republic of Korea politicians and economists had taken note of the impact that Hallyu, or the Korean wave, was having in exports already, especially of pop music at the time. And so this new ministry put the force of government behind the development and expansion of Hallyu, viewing it as an industry not dependent on raw materials, unlike the technology items, the automobiles, and all those other aspects of export production that South Korea was quickly developing also during this period. Cultural exports need no raw materials other than human beings and their minds. And Korea has lots of those. And so it's almost a limitless potential the government started to realize in the late 1990s. And this strategy of government support for cultural exports, like any other economic resource in the country, seems to be paying off. In 2021, cultural-based exports brought $12.4 billion into the South Korean economy. $12.4 billion of only cultural exports in 2021. Unfortunately, it's beyond the scope of this course to give a detailed history of Korean soft power, as it's called, the use of political and economic and cultural power by non-military means to accomplish objectives of a country, in the case of South Korea. But we might just someday look back on the year 2020 as the year South Korea culturally conquered the world. At least that's how it seemed. In 2020, the film Parasite by Bong Joon-ho swept every major film competition in the entire world, while at the same time, pop groups BTS and Blackpink pretty much wiped the pop charts, covered the entire pop charts. And of course, our lovely chaebols, Samsung, LG, and Kia, as well as others, were setting records in industrial exports in their own areas of competition. So we can just say that Korea seemed unstoppable by the year 2020. And so here we are in 2023, asking the question, what's next for the Koreas? Not only the Republic of Korea, but the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea as well. Will the Republic of Korea, South Korea, literally take over the world culturally and economically? Will the two Koreas somehow reunify? And then how would that impact them and the world in the 2020s? Or will another military giant such as China absorb or destroy all that has been achieved in South Korea. Only history will be the judge of all these things. So thank you for being part of this course, and I hope you enjoy the readings. And I'll have more information regarding papers and the exam, which won't be too difficult later on this week. Thank you so much, and have a good week.